we were teaching that Jesus is going to come in a second coming. He is going to come soon, and we're preparing for that second coming of Jesus. And we were teaching that we should not look up into the clouds of the sky for Jesus to come, because he is not going to come that way. We were followers of the other Jesus. We were completely deceived. We were actually working for the Antichrist.
Welcome everyone, and welcome to this very special program that we decided to do live. Usually we do a pre-recording, but tonight a lot of people, a lot of families, even within Christian communities all over the Western societies are celebrating Halloween. And this is the reason why we are doing this program, because a lot of people still have no idea what Halloween is all about. And tonight we're going to cover, at least from a very interesting perspective, because tonight I have with me live from California, from LA, former New Age priest Will Barron. So welcome to the show. Welcome to this program, Will, again.
Thank you, Michael. Wonderful to be with you once again.
Thank you for being with us, and a lot of people. I see already people are being logged on YouTube and watching this program live. And I want to challenge you: if you watch this program live, please forward this link to your friends, your family, whoever you believe that might be interesting to watch this program. And we are ready to take in questions. So if you have questions, especially to Will Barron, to our guest tonight, he's ready to take in your questions. I can follow here with the chat, so please don't hesitate to ask questions. Well, this is a very interesting topic. I know a lot of other people within Christian and without not just necessarily Christian have been covering this topic about Halloween. Today, especially this evening, millions of people, as we mentioned already, throughout the Western world are celebrating Halloween. Now, there is this major influence, this global mass media. Even some non-Western countries are beginning, even I've actually noticed recently, even some Muslim countries, can you imagine that? Some Muslim countries, liberal Muslim countries, have started to have a light version of the Halloween. Now, many people view this, at least in the secular world, and also some Christian, as this is a harmless, fun event for children, for kids. Now, in your opinion, taking into consideration your background, is it something especially for Christian families, but also for anybody else, for secular people, even if you're not a Christian, to celebrate what appears to be some kind of a pagan festival?
Well, Michael, let me start out by saying that Halloween itself was originally a Christian spiritual festival. This is something we need to keep in mind. When I was a young boy, I was born and brought up in the British Isles, and Halloween actually started in the British Isles. It originated in the Celtic cultural areas, which would be Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and also it was prominent in the northeastern part of England. When I was a child, I can tell you, I always looked forward to Halloween. It was fun to celebrate. I really enjoyed it. It was something different. In those days, media didn't play so much a big part, so a lot of activity was out on the streets. And I can imagine today, if some of our viewers are children or parents with children, and I am here saying we should not celebrate Halloween, we should not have any part of it, I know that people would class me as being a spoil sport, that I'm
Hmm.
out to spoil their fun. Um, if we investigate Halloween, I think we'll come to conclusions. It cannot be a matter of my say so, me saying, oh, you shouldn't celebrate Halloween. We need to look at the historical background for Halloween. We need to look at some of the facts in that history. We
Yeah.
need to probe more deeply and analyze how has Halloween changed over the years. It started out as a Christian festival celebration, but how has this now changed into our more modern celebration of Halloween, which is very different um, than the way I certainly celebrated as a boy? And I think then we can come to some logical conclusions of whether it is or is not suitable for children as some kind of fun event.
Right. Now you mentioned that you were looking forward as a kid, as a child, to celebrate Halloween. Uh, Many years has been passing by. Your background, it's also you're born in United Kingdom. You're very close to the place where it seems Halloween originated. So, is there a difference from that time to the Halloween which is being celebrated today?
Oh, vastly different. Some aspects are the same. When I was a young boy in the 1950s and a little bit in the early 1960s, witches were regarded to be evil. They were uh, items of darkness. They were sinister. Witches were classed as being harmful. And this is the big difference. Today, the witches are glorified
Hmm.
or they are jested, they are ridiculed, they're made fun of. What people don't realize today is that witchcraft is a very real craft. It is
Hmm.
something that is very real. It is not just mythology. And this is a big difference. When I was a young boy, it was unthinkable that we would dress up as witches. Witches were the enemy.
Hmm.
And the goal of Halloween was to use jack-o'-lanterns to scare off witches. Now, I know that in reality, witches do not fly on broomsticks, these sweeping
Hmm.
sticks with a black cat sitting on the back of the stick. This is how we portrayed them those days, and that is not reality, but witches and witchcraft is very real today. The Harry Potter series of books has motivated a whole new generation of young people and adults to investigate and explore witchcraft and become followers of the witchcraft rituals. But in my day, yeah, unthinkable to dress as a witch. The purpose of Halloween was to repel witches, not to dress up as them. Incidentally, we did not in the area I live, which is near the city of Manchester. We did not uh, go house to house with the trick or treat tradition of soliciting candies. That did not exist at all in those days, although there was a form of house to house soliciting that was practiced in Ireland and in Scotland, and it was called guising. And that involved children having little skits or mini plays, little theatrical production in front of the homes to solicit food, possibly money too, but it was mainly special pastries that were cooked for the Halloween festival. But that did not happen in my area, and there was certainly nothing of the trick or treat. I mean, when you think about
Hmm.
trick or treat, that is actually quite evil. You're basically telling people, how if you don't treat me to some candies, we're going to play a trick on you. We're going to cause you embarrassment or some minor suffering, or we're going to do some harmful thing to you. I mean, that's basically
Yeah.
sorcery. From my research on this, trick or treat, the actual expression originated in Toronto, in Canada, around 1917, and in our modern culture, quite frankly, gorging yourself on all these sugar candies cannot be healthy for children and certainly not for adults. Another massive difference between the Halloween I celebrated and enjoyed as a child was the fact
Mm.
that in those days, in the 50s and 60s, there was no connection to death and the macabre and horror. That is something very recent, I would say, in the perspective of the fact that Halloween, started originally back in the 4th century, but the macabre, the death focus on horror, was totally absent. It was strictly a night where it was believed that witches and witchcraft were more prominent and on that night, and you needed to protect yourself from these witches and their presence. It was basically the spirits of the witches. The idea was
Right.
these were witches that passed away, and their spirits came alive then on October 31st on the evening, and you had to protect yourself from them.
Mm. Well, just I have a slight minor question in addition to what you just said, because comparing Halloween and the celebration process, as you mentioned before, where you were a child, compared to how it is being celebrated today, and especially the topic of witches and witchcraft. What happened in the mindset of society since today we are experiencing this positive change toward witchcraft and witches? What happened since your childhood till today, where a lot of people are embracing witchcraft and sees witches as something actually a positive force?
I think a lot of the influence of New Age spirituality can account for this. Um, the publication of the Harry Potter series of books
Hmm.
has been a major uh, publicity source for promoting real witchcraft, which is technically called the Wicca religion,
Hmm.
neo-pagan witchcraft or Wicca. The movies connected with Harry Potter and a lot of other movies have featured witchcrafts and witches and wizards. You have fiction books like the Carlos Castaneda series of books that promote shamanism, which is somewhat similar to the craft of witchcraft or Wicca. So yeah, there's definitely been a major increase in interest in those areas where at one time witchcraft was such a negative word that no one would
Hmm.
even dream of studying about it. But the change really started in the 1950s, I would say.
Right.
But
And
it accelerates through mass media.
And based on your background as a former New Age priest, back when you were a priest in the New Age movement, how did you and how did New Age and your priesthood, how did you look upon witches?
Well, believe it or not, I came out of the classical New Age, which started out with the Theosophical Society, founded by a Russian mystic, Madame Blavatsky. It founded in New York City in 1875, and then she had lady that was a channeler of spirits, these ascended masters, Alice Bailey. She was basically from England, from the city of Manchester, but an immigrant to the United States, to California. And she started channeling these ascended master spirit guides and brought out a lot more teachings
Mm.
for the New Age movement. So, in a sense, probably most of New Age in its spirituality or religious theology is based on the Alice Bailey and Helen Petrovna Blavatsky books that they published. But New Age expanded exponentially, and began to include all kinds of religions. New Age includes classic Hinduism, it includes Buddhism, Zoroastrianism. I would say the main teaching of the New Age is that all religions are of God, all of them, including
Mm.
Christianity and Islam, Judaism. They're all from God. It doesn't matter what religion you follow. And they also teach that the ancient pagan religions of the British Isles and of Europe, the Druids and the Celts, their religions were all of God. So it's all religion is for God. It's a matter of which religion is best for you, for where you're at on your path in your life at this particular moment. And you can always change to a different religion. But
Hmm.
for me, as a classic New Ager, yeah, I look with great suspicion of any kind of witchcraft or Satanism. I certainly never, in my mind, believed that I was part of a Luciferian religion, which I later discovered it was, to my great shock. And I was so happy that I was rescued from that deception. I guess in a nutshell, the big problem is that New Age spirituality does not believe in the existence of Satan. They do not believe that there is
Hmm.
this great archangel of evil that rebelled in heaven, and he's got hordes of evil angels we call demons that are perpetrating deception and wreaking havoc with the world. New Age does not believe that at all.
Hmm.
And so any kind of spiritual experience you have, it has to come from God. It has to be from a divine source because there is no evil in the world except ignorance. That's, according to New Age, is the only evil is ignorance. So there can be nothing evil about celebrating Halloween, even though I was averse to the occultic type of Halloween celebration in the early days of New Age. But now, of course, realize New Age spirituality embraces almost everything that could be spiritual or religious in any manner whatsoever.
Well, very important point you're making here because people and our viewers have to look at a broader perspective when we're talking about Halloween. Halloween has become part of what you mentioned before New Age, and I have a question here. The question is that would children be influenced in your understanding if they dress as witches and they act like a witch and kind of practice witchcraft? As I understand the question coming in here, if they practice just for fun witchcraft, would it would just be like an innocent game, or would you say, based on your New Age experience, that there will be some influence on children?
This is the big danger.
Mm.
What children play at as they get older and become adults, they're going to be curious. What is the reality of this?
Mm.
And you go online, you just do a Google on witchcraft or witches, and you can be exposed to a huge amount of materials. And there is
Right.
a true movement of this Wicca religion or witchcraft or wizardry. It's out there. A lot of materials. I
Mm.
do have some samples here. It started with a British civil servant, Gerald Gardner. He wrote this book in, I believe it was 1951. It's Witchcraft Today. This was the very first book to promote the neo pagan witchcraft or Wicca religion. What is very interesting is that before Gerald Gardner wrote his books on witchcraft, which really set the stage for an explosion of interest in the craft, what is interesting, Gerald Gardner was formerly a member of a Rosicrucian order, and he claims he was part of a Wicca coven in southern England. He also used extensively the teachings of the notorious British occultist Aleister
Mm.
Crowley. Aleister Crowley himself practiced ceremonial magic, this Western occult tradition, and Crowley even named himself the Beast 666. He was so proud and so outrageous in the things that he did.
Mm.
And Gerald Gardner, who is regarded to be the father of witchcraft, he actually takes a lot of his teachings from Aleister Crowley's ceremonial magic and incorporates this within the neo-pagan witchcraft. And he incorporates teachings from Theosophy and Rosicrucian, which is an earlier version of the Theosophical teachings. So this is all coming from mainstream New Age. In fact, Gardner's Wicca religion is really not closely connected with what we know about the original witchcraft of the Celts. They perform mainly fertility rites for a
Hmm.
good harvest or better crops or personal fertility for children if you were having difficulty having children. It was the original witchcraft of the British Isles was not remotely like what Gerald Gardner basically invented. He took a lot of these occult teachings from Masonry, Freemasonry, from ceremonial magic, and he packaged it, calling it Wicca witchcraft. But it's really a new age spirituality, just using some different words and different names and different rituals. But
Yeah,
it is part of New Age,
it's a
and
quite
children
interesting and
can be
yeah, yeah. Go
children
ahead.
can be seduced into that because they're exposed to it through the costumes and all this stuff's online. And then you have books like this one written by Silver Raven Wood, which is obviously a pen name, but this is Teen Witch.
Hmm.
And I think you can see that on the camera. Children
Yeah.
buy all these books in the bookstores, and they're fascinated by this, and they're involved then in the occult. And this is where demonic power then can take control. I think that is the big danger of dressing up in witchcraft costumes.
So even if, let's say, these children are coming from, let's say, Christian family, maybe a Christian background, the exposure, even as a play, as a game, to witchcraft and witches, it's a dangerous path.
I
That's
believe it really is because
yeah.
Satan and his evil angels are real, and they put ideas into the minds of children, and when they grow up as teenagers and adults, they put these ideas into their mind to investigate or explore the witchcraft, because this is all, I believe, Satan's religion. It's just another counterfeit religion out there, together with many others that are out there.
Right. Now you mentioned that Halloween historically was a distinctly Christian festival, and I'm quite sure that a lot of people doesn't even know that today. Please, could you briefly tell our viewers about the origins of the religious aspect of Halloween? And also, it's quite interesting because 31st of October, if you could combine your explanation, it's also uh, festivity for the Protestant Reformation. So, is there any connection in between these celebrations?
Yes, the Halloween itself is an English word, and it's actually an abbreviation for three words. The three words are All Hallows Evening, and that
Hmm.
was then shortened to All Hallows Eve and shortened further to Halloween. So Halloween is All Hallows Evening. The word hallow means holy or consecrated, sacred, saintly. Some of you that are familiar with the Lord's Prayer in the King James Version of the English Bible, there's a line there, hallowed be thy name. So Halloween or hallowed is connected with God's name, that God's name is his character, which is sacred and holy. Um, All Hallows is Old English for all saints. So
Hmm.
hallow, the hallow part is connected with saints, those people that are saintly, that are sacred, that are righteous, that are consecrated to ministry. And All Hallows Evening, this longer version of what Halloween is, All Hallows Evening simply meant All Saints Evening. And it was the evening before All Saints Day. All Saints Day was celebrated on November the 1st, and the celebration actually started in the evening of the prior day, which would be October 31st. So, in a
Hmm.
sense, Halloween is All Saints Evening, and it's a festival to commemorate and celebrate the great saints of Christianity, people like Jerome and Eusebius and many of the great saints, including, of course, the biblical saints. In the Bible that I have, it says the Gospel of Saint Matthew, and then Saint Mark, Saint Luke, Saint John. So this was a day to celebrate the great saints of Christianity, especially those who were martyred for their faith. There was an emphasis on martyred saints, especially.
Right. Now, I'm curious, why did the celebration of All Saints' Day begin in the evening of the prior day?
Well, you must remember that if you think back to the early church, the time of the apostles, it was actually a Jewish church. Those that became Christians, that had accepted that Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah, they were initially Jews, plus some Gentiles who had already been converted to Judaism.
Hmm.
They were known as the God-fearers. And so this early church, initially Jews, and then you have God-fearers like Cornelius joining the church or the community of believers in Jesus. These were Jews or converts to Judaism that accepted Jesus as the Messiah. And in the early church, they continued many of the practices and traditions of Judaism. For example, in the early days of the early church, they still celebrated the festival days of Judaism according to the law of Moses. For example,
Hmm.
Passover or Pentecost or the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur in Hebrew, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Initially, in that early church, these annual Jewish
Hmm.
festivals were still celebrated. And according to Jewish time reckoning, a day begins at sunset. When the sun sets, that
Hmm.
begins the new day. And
Right.
so the Jewish and Judaism calendar, the calendar of the Israelites, went from sunset to sunset. So we have an example, for example, Christmas. When we celebrate Christmas, when do we start celebrating Christmas? On Christmas Eve. This, although Christmas was not a festival that started right in the Apostolic Church, it came much later, but it was celebrated according to Jewish time reckoning initially on Christmas Eve, and then you have the Christmas Day. Well, Halloween was the same thing. When you celebrated All Saints' Day, it actually began initially at sunset on the preceding day, October 31st, and that's when you started the celebration. And of course, the celebration then resumed on the date of November the 1st. And it's really Halloween is simply the beginning of the celebration of All Saints' Day.
Right.
That's what it basically is in terms of a religious festival.
Well, as you mentioned before, Halloween today is not what it used to be before. So the Christian celebration of All Saint Day, a day to acknowledge and give thanks for the great saints of the past, especially those who had been martyred. That was the main purpose of the All Saint Day. How did this festival today change into an event that now heavily involves a focus on death, dying, and witchcraft, as we mentioned before? There is a lot of witchcraft, which basically has kind of counteracted the main purpose of the Halloween that started people. When I'm looking at the secular people today around here, even in Scandinavia, Europe, there is no sign of actually celebrating or has anything to do with All Saints Day, the Christian perspective. What happened?
Well, this All Saints' Day, to the best of we know from the writings of the post-apostolic fathers, it started to be commemorated around the 4th century. So we're looking, 300 years after Jesus was crucified on the cross there. And it was actually celebrated in the spring. And then quite a number of years, like 500 years later, in the British Isles, the celebration started to move to celebrating it in the fall on November the 1st. And around 100 years after the introduction of All Saints' Day being on November the 1st, there was the Roman Catholic Church then standardized the observance of All Souls' Day, which is a separate festival. It was standardized to be on November the 2nd, the day after All Saints' Day. Now, if you're if you have been affiliated with the Roman Catholic Church, or you are have been a former Roman Catholic or
Hmm.
still are, you very well know what All Souls Day is. This was the day to commemorate deceased family members, especially the faithful family members. And this was not to focus on the formal great saints and martyrs of the church. It was to focus on your own family members that had passed away. So on All Souls Day, families would go to cemeteries and they would commemorate the faith of those that had passed away. It would obviously be a time of grief for many people and a time of joy as well, to remember the good times that you had with your family
Hmm.
members, whether it would be husbands or wives that have passed away, or children that died maybe in childhood, or aunts and uncles. So you have this All Souls Day celebrated on November the 2nd. And in Catholic majority countries, All Souls Day is still celebrated very prominently on November the 2nd. And so you have, with these three consecutive days, Halloween, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, you have then a focus somewhat on death and dying because of the influence of All Souls' Day.
Hmm.
This 3-day festival, incidentally, began to be called All Hallows Tide. Tide simply means period or time period, and it's now becomes a 3-day festival. And with any festival, you've got people without faith, irreligious people, people that have no religion. They join in the festival, but they then introduce non-religious items, such as this focus on the macabre and horror and death. It's almost as if secular people want to deny that death is serious. Now, to Christians, death is very serious, because when you die, you face judgment as to what's going to happen after you die. There's a judgment there, and there is going to be this judgment. And of course, secular people want to deny this. So I think they basically make fun of death. And this is
Hmm.
promoted by Hollywood. Halloween is also big business. All these costumes and all these gravestones that you can buy now, these plastic gravestones that you can put in your front yards, and all these cobwebs and things. It's big business for our capitalist society, and it is also big money for Hollywood that promotes these things. And
Yeah.
so we have now this moving towards death, dying, and the macabre, which originally never was. This was a sacred festival to remember the saints, the martyrs, and personal family members.
Right. Well, is there any particular reason why the celebration of All Saint Days, as it used to be before All Souls Day, as you mentioned, fell on the 1st of November and the 2nd?
This is really a very interesting point. Originally, in that post-apostolic church in the beginning in the 4th century, you have All Saints' Day was celebrated in the spring. In the Western Church, what became the Roman Catholic Church, All Saints' Day was actually celebrated uh, near Easter. Mostly in most
Hmm.
regions, it was the Sunday following Easter Sunday. That next Sunday was when you celebrated All Saints' Day. And in the Eastern churches, which is now what we call the Eastern Orthodox Communion, it was celebrated after Pentecost, the festival of Pentecost, which was 50 days after the celebration of Easter. And so you have these celebrations in the spring. And in fact, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, even today, All Saints'
Hmm.
Day is celebrated the Sunday right after Pentecost. They never did join this whole Halloween thing. Now, what is interesting, even though for 400 years or more, you have All Saints' Day celebrated the week after Easter, the Sunday after Easter, in towards the end of the 8th century in the British Isles, especially in the Celtic regions of Ireland and Wales, Scotland, northeast England, they began to celebrate All Saints' Day on November the 1st. In other words, they moved it,
Yeah, yeah.
several months uh, later in the year. And this trend just began in a few churches, and it actually spread to many other churches within the British Isles. And eventually, the whole of the British Isles changed the celebration of All Saints' Day from the spring to November the 1st. And
Mm,
according to the study I've done in the early 9th century, this trend spread to Bavaria in Germany, it spread to the Frankish kingdom, which was centered on the Netherlands and Belgium. And the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory the Fourth, he advocated for this new date for All Saints' Day. And we have a record that in the year AD 835, Louis the Pious, who was the emperor of the Frankish Empire, he made November 1st obligatory as a day of celebration to celebrate the great saints of Christianity. It was mandatory in his country, and in his mandate that he issued, he said that this change was at the insistence of Pope Gregory the Fourth, and it had the
mm.
assent of all the bishops. So, for whatever reason, and I believe this was demonic, to be quite frank, that's my personal opinion, that it was moved to November the 1st. And the Frankish Empire subsequently changed into the Holy Roman Empire. And so this celebration of All Saints' Day on November the 1st became standard throughout the whole of the Western Church. In fact, by the 12th century, to the historical records we have, November 1st fully established in the Western Church, although the Eastern Orthodox Church kept their All Saints' Day the first Sunday after Pentecost. It's interesting how
Okay.
you have this day, the change
Yeah.
of the day when you celebrate a festival, a religious
Quite in,
festival.
quite interesting, as you say, because we have churches, local churches in first in Ireland, as you mentioned, which were supposed to, let's say, keep a Christian tradition, and then later at Northeast England began to change the day of celebration of what it was a Christian festival, and this change then became very widespread, as you said, across Europe, eventually even endorsed and promoted by the papacy, and then even mandated by the secular political authorities. So, do we know why those local churches in the first place in the British Isles made the change to November the 1st? It seems that there has been some merge of pagan with Christianity. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, for the best that we can tell from the historical records, the change was made because November the 1st was a big day of celebrating a Celtic pagan
Mm,
festival called Samhain. And Samhain was celebrated on November the 1st. It was basically a harvest festival celebration. Here in the United States, where I now have lived for over 40 years, we have what is known as Thanksgiving, which is a harvest celebration, and it's the last Thursday in November. But most countries celebrate the Harvest Festival in early November or late October. When the more north you go, obviously you tend to
mm,
celebrate it earlier because you have a earlier harvest. But the research indicates that the local churches had two objectives. They wanted to somehow push out of existence this pagan celebration of Samhain. Samhain was celebrated before Christianity was established in
Hmm.
the British Isles. The Celts had their own pagan religion and all their festivals and traditions. And as Christianity became established in the British Isles, there was a need, in a sense, to try to get rid of the pagan festivals, but apparently the festival of Samhain continued to be very actively celebrated. So I think the early church probably had in mind, well, if we move All Saints' Day to November the 1st, maybe that will be a reason for people to forget Samhain, and maybe
Hmm.
some of the British people who still followed the pagan religions, the Celtic religions, maybe they would even it would be even easier for us to convert them to Christianity. And basically, what started in small areas in local churches
Hmm.
spread very quickly. And within 400 or 500 years, the whole of Western Europe is now celebrating, in a sense, on the day of the Celtic pagan festival of Samhain.
Hey.
Uh, and Samhain, it's interesting, that day by the Celtic pagans was considered to be a day in which the barrier or boundary between this world in which we live and the other world, the nether world, thinned, or the barrier was lessened. And it was believed on November the 1st, and this now sort of also involved October 31st, because Halloween was the start of that celebration of All
Hmm.
Saints' Day. So on Halloween evening and All Saints' Day, it was believed that if you were careful, you could see the spirits of fairies and hobgoblins. Now, in the Celtic religion, they were not actually called witches, but this you're getting near
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
concept of witches flying around. But these are fairies and hobgoblins, and basically, the Christian church in the British Isles adopted the day of a pagan festival, and pagan elements started to creep into this celebration, especially on October 31st. Halloween involved then this sole focus on witches, and of course, originally it was to scare away witches, but now it's to indulge in dressing up as witches and pretending to be witches, and
Yeah.
basically a celebration of witchcraft. Through immigration, these celebrations all came to the New World, to North America, to South America, and through media, we have this celebration now globally. It was tragic in this year, to
Hmm.
2022, that we had just yesterday a group of Koreans in Korea celebrating Halloween, or getting ready to celebrate it, where they had this crush, and over 150 people are killed in this Halloween mad
Wow.
rush to buy all the paraphernalia for Halloween or whatever they were doing. I'm not sure of the details.
Well, it's quite interesting if you look back at the last 500 years, even if, let's say, the motive, you mentioned that these local churches in Ireland, they had the motive, maybe a noble motive to get the pagan local communities to kind of forget about the pagan occult celebration of Samhain. But if you look back today, is this a success? Is the word at a point right now where they actually forgot about the pagan celebration, or on the contrary?
No, it is the religious celebration that is forgotten, and it is the pagan festival that has come to the ascendancy. So obviously, Halloween now is basically a pagan, secular
Hmm.
pagan festival, and of course the New Agers. I know in England, in Glastonbury, which is a big center for New Age activity, they have parades to celebrate Samhain on November the 1st. And of course, the celebration starts the evening before on Halloween.
Right.
So it's a big pagan festival, a big parade, if you will.
So the conclusion must be looking back at the history that trying to merge pagan with Christianity, eventually it will turn the world into a pagan world.
It
That's
seems to be,
it seems to be because the demonic
yes.
attraction and obviously the demonic power which has been around at that time in the Celtic religions and the pagan Celtic. You mentioned also the goblins, which is part of the Harry Potter movement. It's not just a book, it's a movement today. Right. Well, another question I have is from what you described, the celebration of Halloween on the eve of October the 31st was originally the beginning of the celebration of All Saints' Day on November the 1st, and then All Souls' Day on November the 2nd. So this 3-day celebration called All Hallows Tide was a fundamental part at that point in the Middle Ages of the Roman Catholic liturgical calendar at a time when the religion of Western Europe was Roman Catholic. Now, the
Yes.
Protestant Reformation came along. We all know, at least in this part of the world, about the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther came along. We know the 95 Theses. Wittenberg. Did the Protestant Reformation abandon this celebration? Did the Protestant Reformation attack this pagan celebration in a sense?
It did not. Many aspects of the celebration of All Hallows Tide, the 3-day festival, were abandoned, but not abandoned completely. For example, the Protestant Reformation eventually was centered on 4 of the major, what we could call mainline
Yeah.
denominations: the Lutheran Church, the Reformed Church, the Anglican Church, and then a little bit later, the Methodist Church. These 4 denominations continue to celebrate All Saints' Day on November the 1st because it was an established tradition, and they didn't feel that it was necessary to change that. But the focus was on the spiritual celebration, to celebrate the great saints of the past, celebrate the martyrs. Some local churches continue to also celebrate family members on that day, but it was never done on November the
Hmm.
2nd. The celebration, it was both of the saints, the major saints, and personal family members of the faithful would be celebrated all on November the 1st. Because Halloween itself, that evening of October 31st, had now become, by the time of the Reformation, had become somewhat paganized already, not as bad as it is today. The reformers decided to pretty much keep away from Halloween. In the Reformed tradition, you really don't have a religious celebration of Halloween. It is just focused on just that one day. And in fact, when the evangelical movement started, in the Great Awakenings and these holiness movements, they don't even celebrate All Saints' Day at all. They just walk away completely from this whole Halloween and All Hallows Tide celebration. Evangelical churches typically are not involved at all in that
Right.
festival. It has been turned over to the secular people and to the New Agers and to
Hmm.
Hollywood, basically.
Okay, well, we kind of already covered. My next question it's about again witchcraft and witches. We you lightly covered this a little bit before in this webcast, this live stream. What happened again? What was, let's say, the engine behind? What kind of force put the focus on witches and witchcraft that entered into the modern Halloween celebration? And again, if we look at the Western society and everybody celebrating Halloween today, it's basically witches, witchcraft, death. There is a death worship in built in as the main focus on Halloween, and where is the danger? Not just on witchcraft and wishes, but the danger of playing with death. And this is a death cult, as I see it
Yes.
from my perspective.
Yes, it is very tragic indeed that we have a death cult. The whole horror movies that used to be something that happened in theaters is now brought out on the streets. Um, there's no question that the Celtic pagan festival of Samhain was very influential in moving Halloween to be an occult phenomena. But I'm not aware that Samhain involved actual witches or witchcraft. I'm not aware of that, but it was certainly influential. But I think that Satan and his evil angels have an
Hmm.
agenda, and they don't necessarily need any pagan tradition to convert something that was originally religious into something that is
Hmm.
satanic. They don't need that. They just need to be inspiring Hollywood producers, Hollywood executives, and I'm using Hollywood in a very generic sense, the worldwide global media. And it's not just films and TV, it could be videos online. It could be YouTube channels like what we have, Light Channel Denmark, but it's a dark channel Denmark, if you will, that is
Hmm.
promoting a lot of this thing. And in our modern media intensive culture, it is so easy for, I believe, Satan and his evil angels to motivate producers at all levels of media to produce this type of death cult material and to focus on witches and witchcraft. I believe it is all part of a plot to seduce people away from mainstream conservative biblical Christianity. I think that is the issue. Satan and his evil angels have an agenda through things like Halloween to destroy Christianity and replace it by New Age spirituality in all its forms. It doesn't matter whether it's Hinduism or the Theosophical Society, Ascended Masters, or uh, all kinds of gurus that are out there, or New
Hmm.
Age psychologists, New Age healing. Doesn't matter what form it takes, as long as it is not Bible based faith, then Satan is happy and he achieves the goals of his agenda.
Right. And wouldn't you say that it's not just sad and but it's also, I would say, tragic that we find Halloween celebration even in Christian communities, even within our own Christian denomination.
Yes, yeah. And children, it's so sad for children that are not going to receive a Christian education. I mean, I was born and brought up in a very conservative Christian family, and I still migrated over to the occult. Really started through visiting where I was in high school. Just across the street, we had a theater or cinema that specialized in horror movies, and I was tempted to go and watch them, and I went and watched them, and these were horror movies about devil worshipping and about the occult. One particular movie called The Devil Rides Out was so scary, and it implanted in my heart a fascination for the occult. This idea of we have hidden secret knowledge that if you were privy to it, it would help you in your life, and the occult promises you power and prosperity. And I fell for
Hmm.
those temptations, and I see my involvement in watching horror movies as the start of my journey into the real world of the occult. Well, I was in a theater, you had to pay to go in there. Well, today you can get all those horror
Hmm.
movies right on your smartphone, right on your computer or on your TV. You can get it on the street in the form of a living pantomime, children wearing all these costumes and adults wearing them. The temptation and the seduction is everywhere today, and my heart grieves for the children that,
Right.
as children, enjoy this kind of thing, but don't realize how dangerous it is. And as a reality, even in Christianity, about half of those that profess to be Christians do not believe that Satan exists. I mean, that is a statistic
That's
that has been
astonishing.
acquired through research. Half of Christians don't even believe Satan is real. They think it's just a mythical expression, a symbolic, figurative expression for just a tendency within us to gravitate
Hmm.
towards evil. And there is a tendency within,
Yeah.
that is true. But there is a real Satan and devils out there that's motivating the media industry, and all this Halloween paraphernalia. It's being motivated and it's taking over the whole world. Tragic.
Yeah. Well, it's quite interesting to realize, as you just mentioned, the statistic that it seems that Christianity, at least that half of Christianity, has a major problem in explaining evil if the originator of evil doesn't exist and is just a metaphor. Well, it seems also that evil has become kind of commercialized, as you also mentioned before. Hollywood, which you live very near to, has done a great job to commercialize evil through all these occult and uh, pagan practices. Now, I hear even within our own denomination, and we're not here to be judgmental. I just want to point this, and as I know you very well, Will Barron, you have dedicated, as we mentioned in previous webcasts, you have dedicated your life to educate people and to tell people about the dangers. You were also, from your own perspective, you were very close of dying of these evil forces because you came very near to these evil forces. So here you are again and trying to warn everybody which is willing to listen. So please do forward this webcast to anybody, to our viewers, if you might find it interesting and important for your family. Maybe you have children, maybe you have neighbors, whoever you think you love and you care for, please forward this. This is a very important information. It's not just if you're a Christian, also from a secular perspective. A lot of people today we realize is that evil is a real force out there now. And as I said before, I hear even Christians saying that, wearing costumes and playing, with pumpkins and all these other paraphernalia, is there any danger even for adults celebrating as a secular fun event by means of dressing up as witches, wizards, goblins, and whatever?
Well, Michael, I think we can learn from the Holy Scriptures. What does the Holy Scriptures
Hmm.
have to say about these things? And I'm reminded of the passage in Deuteronomy 18, starting verse 9. The Israelites had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years and they were about to enter the
Hmm.
promised land. And then God, speaking through the prophet Moses, gave the Israelites this warning. Deuteronomy 18, verse 9, I'm reading from the New International Version. It says there, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire,
Hmm.
who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft. There they are. We are not to engage in witchcraft. And sorcery is just a different variation of witchcraft,
Hmm.
or cast spells, or who is a medium, or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. This is all what you do with Halloween. You're pretending to have connections with the dead and you mock the dead and you engage in dressing up as witchcrafts, as witches and wizards. Verse 12 tells us anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Because
Hmm.
because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. So we've got clear counsel in Scripture. God does not want us involved in these detestable practices. And people will say, well, we're only dressing up as witches. We're not actually doing witchcraft itself. But in the Bible, the Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 22, it tells us this, says, abstain from all appearance of evil. Abstain from all appearance of evil. Well, I would suggest that dressing up as a witch or as a wizard is an appearance of evil. You're appearing in the form of something that is
It's pretty
basically
much.
evil. Yes, and the Bible says, abstain from all appearances of evil. The celebration of Halloween in our modern secular manner and the New Age spirituality manner, it trivializes witchcraft. Witchcraft and wizardry is deadly serious. God is deadly serious about this, and He warns us, don't get involved in this kind of activity. It is serious. Your soul is in danger of peril from these satanic forces that are the powers behind all these incantations and rituals and invocations that goes on in the ceremonial magic rituals of Wicca witchcraft.
Right. And now, one of the mechanisms, as you mentioned, is clairvoyance and clairaudience. And you, as a Christian, you already mentioned some Bible verses. And we know that a lot of people in secular societies, even, which they sense that they have a sixth sense, the sense of seeing something that other people are not able to do that. In your experience as a former New Age priest, are these people really gifted with this sense? Are these abilities something that can be developed? Anybody can do it with training and practice? Because if you look online, internet, Facebook, actually here, even in Little Denmark, I see commercial, I see advertising for training session that anyone can actually become, almost anyone.
I think that the training basically does give you sensitivity to the spirit world, but it is the world of the evil spirits. And most of this training is involving transcendental meditation and all the paraphernalia connected with meditation, creative visualization, for example, and occult rituals that you'll perform during meditation, not something that you perform physically, but in this zombie like state, an altered state
Mm-hmm.
of consciousness known as transcendental meditation, where you transcend normal consciousness and you then go into a state of altered consciousness. This is where the demonic power can be at work. And yes, you can become sensitive to the spirit world, but it's demonic spirits that you're sensitive to. And it is extremely dangerous. You know, I was involved in the New Age movement for 10 years before the last 2 years became the New Age nightmare, as I call it, where demonic spirits totally took control of me. I was totally demonized by these demonic spirits that I thought were ascended masters. I thought these were from God, that
Hmm.
these were lighted beings that come from heaven, and that I thought I was part of a movement to prepare the way for the second coming of Jesus. But in reality, I was part of an antichrist religion. All this Halloween and all the New Age spirituality, its ultimate goal is for Satan and his evil angels to take control of the world and prepare the world for the what is going to be the coming of the final antichrist. Now we don't know exactly how he's going to come. Various authors have had opinions on how to understand the scriptures regarding the Antichrist, but there is a final Antichrist going to come who I believe is going to take control of the world. And I believe the book of Revelation describes a lot of what is going to happen in those last days just before the second coming of the real
Yes.
Lord
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. The most important thing is make sure you're ready for the coming of the real Jesus. Get to know the real Jesus. The Apostle Paul in Second Corinthians chapter 11, he talks about the other Jesus, the counterfeit Jesus, the false Jesus. And connected with this other Jesus, there is a different spirit and a different gospel. And we need to be so careful that we are anchored in the true gospel, which is given to us in scriptures through the Holy Bible. And the Bible is very clear that all the people practicing witchcraft, wizardry, the occult arts, New Age spirituality in all its different forms and variations. The Bible says there in the book of Revelation, the end, chapter 22, verse 12, it says, outside, and that's talking about the New Jerusalem, outside of the New Jerusalem of heaven are the dogs, those who practice magic arts, or in your King James Bible, it says, uses the word sorcery basically being magic arts. The sexually immoral, the murderers, the idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. These are all going to be outside God's kingdom, outside of the New Jerusalem. And we don't want to be outside of the New Jerusalem at all. We
Right.
don't want to miss out on the great glory and the joy and the ecstasy of what the heaven is going to be like. But the Bible's very clear. If you practice magic arts, this is the theosophy, the Freemasonry, occult rituals, the Western ceremonial magic, um, Wicca, witchcraft, and all the other paraphernalia that comes out of Eastern religions. I'm afraid that your soul is in peril of failing to be in that tremendous great city of God, that New Jerusalem.
That's right on point. And one of the last question I want to ask you here in this live stream, to summarize, just to put it in plain language, would you say that there is a major risk of opening for demonic power when you actually, even if you don't believe in Satan, and even if you don't believe in God, but you're in a danger of opening for demonic power when you play with witchcraft?
Well, if you don't believe in Satan, you are all the more at risk. All the more at risk. And usually with Satan and his deceptions and temptations, it's very gradual. These things start small, and then you get more and more and more and more involved in the occult or transcendental meditation. But it starts very small, it's very innocent initially. But eventually, absolutely, this can lead to being part of Satan's kingdom and dominion of darkness. But you think it's light. But Paul warns that Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light, and his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness. All these Wiccans and these witches in the New Age movement and the occult, they all claim to have light. When I was involved in this, the center that I was part of was called the Lighted Way. So there's always this emphasis on light. But you know,
Yeah.
Lucifer, that name Lucifer in Latin really means light bearer. And but it is a false light. It is a light that is actually dark. It is not the true light of the Lord Jesus Christ and his
Yes.
salvation.
Yeah.
And I encourage
Yeah.
parents to make Halloween special for your kids by doing special things for your kid. Maybe special parties, but not to celebrate Halloween. I know some churches have special events on the evening of Halloween to get the attention of children away from all this witchcraft and macabre and all this occult stuff, and to do something special for your kids so that they have something better to celebrate than Halloween.
Thank you very much, Will. That was a very important point to make here at the end of this live stream, this webcast. And I'm also glad that for you that join here live, our viewers, and the question that has been asked here, but also the fact that you've been covering the basically this topic from a broader perspective, because Halloween is just part of a broader, let's say, evil package. Halloween is just one of the topics and one of the tools that the evil Satan is using to attract and to damage humanity. And unfortunately, this is a practice which is being embraced by children, very young children, if you look around on the streets today. So this is also a
Michael,
major.
could I
Go
just say
ahead.
one last thing too?
Sure.
When I started getting involved deeply in New Age and I was practicing the transcendental meditation, which is called mindfulness or mindfulness meditation today, I had an appearance of my first spirit guide, an ascended master, appeared in an incredible visionary experience. It's described in my book, and that happened on Halloween. It's very interesting
Hmm.
that my first
Would you
spirit
say
guide, who
that's a
claimed to be
coincidence?
cool. I don't think it's a coincidence at all.
Hmm.
No, it is the demonic forces. They are very, very active and busy in Halloween. But my first spirit guide, the
Hmm.
Ascended Master Cool. Now, this was an evil angel of Satan masquerading as a so-called Ascended Master, as Cool. He appeared right there, October 31st. This was 1981. So definitely there's a connection between the Luciferian New Age, New World Order and Halloween. Definite connection.
Well, I know we talked about this ascended master, whatever the spirit or cool, before in some of our previous webcasts. Not to start this topic, but you also mentioned Madame Blavatsky, which she also mentioned the same spirit, the same master, inspiring her, and this is a very interesting topic, and we can advise our viewers. We can tell you that we're going to continue new live streams on new age topic and specific topics on this. I know, as a matter of fact, probably everybody knows, as we discussed before, Will, Europe has been embracing more or less New Age as never before. There is a wave, there is a trend now today. A lot of people, due to what's happening around the world, a lot of people, they have realized that somehow they need a spiritual side of their, let's say, life awareness. Now, there is a question here, and if you still have patience with us, Will. We would love to take questions from our viewers. There is a question: what about the Norwegian tradition, Yule book, and after Christmas? I don't know if you know about this pagan Norwegian tradition.
Unfortunately, I am not familiar with it. No, I'm sorry, I don't know about that.
All right, that's all right. Well, another question I see here, it's about when you talk to Christian parents, what kind of reaction do you get when you explain to Christian parents about what you've just been explaining here about Halloween?
Well, I think there are two reactions. There is
Hmm.
a reaction, kind of a spoil sport. You know, here I am warning people about participating in these activities, and I'm spoiling their fun, I'm spoiling their party. And that is real. I don't want to deny that, but we can't look at just the short term. Yes, the kid might be disappointed in the short term. We have to look at the long term. And I certainly wished someone would have warned me
Hmm.
about the occult and the New Age movement before I got involved in it, because the last 2 years of my involvement, it was an absolute nightmare. And I also think back, supposing that the Holy Spirit would never have worked a miracle to get me out of that New Age movement. Supposing I was still in it, I'd hate to think what my life would be like. I just really hate to think, because of that nightmare. And of course, the Holy Spirit interceded, because my parents were very dedicated Christians and
Hmm.
they were praying for me for over 16 years. And God saw an opportunity to rescue me from that deception. But the best solution is really don't get involved in the first place, because
In
there
the
are
first
many
place.
children of Christian parents that get involved in New Age and never do leave. They never leave. That's
Hmm.
tragic. I'm so thankful that for whatever
Yeah.
reason, God chose to work a miracle to deliver me from that deception.
Because the final goal of New Age is, based on your experience, it's not to enlighten as New Age promises people. The final goal is to, what did you experience in your life? Because you've been brought to a suicidal, basically, phase in your
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah, it's all about control. Satan has an agenda to control the whole world. You imagine if Satan controlled everybody on planet Earth? Well, the second coming of Jesus wouldn't be welcomed in the sense of the real Jesus. It would be a disappointment because everyone is following the Antichrist. And I don't know exactly what Satan expects. Maybe he thinks if he has enough followers that he can survive the second coming of Jesus or something. I don't know, but there's an agenda definitely that Satan is on an agenda to control the whole world and to destroy Christianity, Bible-based Christianity, and to implement a new world order which he will govern. That's his whole goal. It's just like what he has in Isaiah. I want to be like the Most High. I want to sit upon the mount of the assembly. Satan still has a goal to rule the world. But
Yes.
Jesus is stronger than Satan, and the saints will prevail. But we are warned there's going to be a great tribulation ahead. There's going to be some very difficult times. Satan is going around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, and we have to be on our guard. Absolutely.
Right. Amen to that. And would you say that Halloween, it's a major part of the spiritual warfare which is going on right now,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes. A major part. Absolutely. Yes.
There is an explanation from the question before about the Norwegian Yule book. It seems that it's similar to going from door to door, dressed in costumes. This is what they do in Norway, and actually they also do in Denmark. I don't know about Sweden. And expect to be given candies. This is something similar to what's going on during Halloween, right? So obviously there
Sounds
is
very similar.
some kind of a combination of these two practices.
It sounds that way. It does.
Right. Okay. Well, again, thank you everyone for being part. We don't want to keep you too long, and thank you, Will, for taking part in this webcast. For anyone who, at the end of this program, you're going to see if you want to buy and or get hands on Will Barron's book. If you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend you to read it, especially nowadays. As we mentioned before, there is a tremendous, gigantic wave of New Age taking over Europe. There are people which are very popular. I don't want to mention name here. It's not about being judgmental. And a lot of people are being duped, basically, and coerced and to embrace the New Age movement. But here you are, Will Barron, as a living example of what could have happened to you, as I mentioned before, if the Holy Spirit, thanks to your parents' prayers, didn't do a miracle to bring you out of Satan's claws.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you next time very soon on another topic about what New Age does to the world today. Thank you. Thank you, Will.
Thank you. We were teaching that Jesus is going to come in a second coming. He is going to come soon. And we're preparing for that second coming of Jesus. And we were teaching that we should not look up into the clouds of the sky for Jesus to come, because he is not going to come that way. We were followers of the other Jesus. We were completely deceived. We were actually working for the Antichrist.